Hello, my name is Joe Collins for Joe's A2 Film Productions, and today I will be discussing my evaluation question 1. In what ways does your media product use, develop or challenge forms and conventions of real media products? Now, in terms of the mise-en-scène, my character looked like a typical action thriller character. As you could see from the clothes that he was wearing, he was very sort of casual, and a lot of action thriller characters don't really have a specific type of clothing, unless maybe in some films where some possibly could wear suits. Whilst my character looked sort of casual in a way, and his costume didn't really sort of stand out, which is what I kind of wanted to get across, as a lot of sort of action thriller characters don't really have specific costume types, and they can wear pretty much anything really, from casual clothes to a suit. It varies quite a lot actually, so I decided to just go with a casual look for my character. Also, I used a typical convention of the action thriller genre, which was a gun. I had my main protagonist carry a gun around in the film, which maybe made him look a bit more threatening, which is what I want to get across really, is obviously in the action thriller genre, a gun is quite a common thing really, as obviously it's used in quite a lot of the action scenes. So this would really help in the mise-en-scène in my trailer, as it kind of meets the conventions. Because obviously a gun is a very common thing in an action thriller film, and makes the character look a lot more intimidating, which is what I wanted to get across. Also, the setting for my film wasn't exactly a typical convention of an action thriller genre, because you see, a lot of action thriller genres sort of take place in big cities and really built-up locations, whilst mine was sort of quite a secluded area, which is probably not really meeting the conventions. It sort of challenges the conventions of a action thriller film, as mine was sort of in the sort of like nowhere near a big city really, and it was very secluded, and it was sort of very shut off from a lot of people. I wanted to do this as I wanted to maybe take a different approach, as you know, you see a lot of action thriller films that are set in cities, and I sort of didn't really want to be meeting the conventions in that way. I wanted to sort of change it a little bit and challenge that convention of it being in a city, and maybe do it in sort of a smaller, maybe more, you know, less populated area. Because obviously I did mine in a small village, and this is definitely a lot different to a regular action thriller film, as you'd see them, you know, take place in big cities like, you know, New York, Los Angeles, London, all these big places that usually are settings for action thriller films. In terms of the sound, I would say I used quite typical music that met the conventions of the action thriller genre, as my music was very sort of suspense building. It wasn't really sort of calm music in a way. It sort of started calm, but then it got a lot more sort of intense as the trailer went on. And this is what I want to try and get across, is sort of the trailer kind of builds up the intensity as it goes along, and at the end it sort of cuts all together and the intensity sort of stops, and the tension sort of stops as well. I wanted to get this across in my music, as I wanted music that really sort of gripped the viewer and really sort of caught their attention to watch the trailer overall. And yeah, I thought my music was very good, and it definitely met, I thought, the conventions of the action thriller genre. I mean, some pieces of music in the action thriller genre may be a bit more exciting and a lot more sort of intense, fast-paced, but then you see in some other action thriller films that they don't technically have to be fast-paced and exciting. They can be sort of slower and more, you know, tension-building music, which is what I wanted to get across in my music. Also, I didn't really have a lot of dialogue in my film. I only had really about one line of diegetic dialogue. It wasn't really a lot of dialogue in the trailer altogether, because I didn't really want to give a lot away, to be honest, in the trailer, so that's why I didn't really use dialogue that much in my trailer, because I wanted to sort of keep the secret of the film overall to the audience, and not really give a lot away with the dialogue. So I didn't use a lot of dialogue in my film at all, about one line of dialogue, to be honest. And I guess you could say I didn't meet the conventions in that. I definitely didn't meet the conventions in that respect, as I think a lot of action thriller films have a lot more, or action thriller trailers I should say, have a lot more dialogue in them, as you see with trailers, such as Batman vs Superman, that has a lot more dialogue in it than my trailer. So I did not meet the conventions in that respect of having dialogue in my trailer, but at the same time, I didn't want to give away a lot about the film, so that's why I didn't have a lot of dialogue in it, because I wanted to sort of keep the mystery to the audience about what the film could be about. Also, the editing that I used met the conventions in some ways, but in other ways it didn't. As sort of in some action thriller films, you can see it's a lot of sort of quick cut editing, a lot of fast paced editing, really, and obviously a lot of exciting maybe explosions and stuff. But in my one, it was a lot more slow paced, I'd say. But in some respects, that does meet the conventions of an action thriller film, as you see in a lot of action thriller trailers that it's not always fast paced, exciting, cuts and things like that. Sometimes it does sort of build up a bit slower, and the cuts are sort of a lot slower. As I used quite a lot of fades in my trailer, which is used in some action thriller trailers. But obviously in some other action thriller trailers, it's a lot more fast-paced, a lot more exciting, and a lot more different sort of elements to it. But I wanted to use the tension building in mind with the sort of slow, fading in and outs. And I thought this would be a really good aspect to use in mine, as it would sort of give the audiences a different perspective to look at in an action thriller film, as it will sort of, obviously challenge the conventions in some ways of a typical action thriller trailer. But in other ways it wouldn't, because a lot of action thriller trailers do have this kind of, fading in and out editing in it. So overall, I don't think I did meet the conventions, but in some ways I did. The camera work that I used in my trailer, I felt like it sort of did meet the conventions, as I used a lot of tracking shots. I used a lot of sort of medium and close-up, a lot of kind of basic shots, but then I used a sort of slider shot as well, which you don't actually see a lot of those in action thriller trailers, but again, I felt like I sort of did meet the conventions in this, because I used a lot of the typical camera shots that you'd see in an action thriller trailer. But at the same time, obviously they used a lot more sort of different shots as well that can sort of, show off a lot of the exciting things. So obviously my one wasn't quite as exciting as other action thriller trailers. It was a lot more sort of slow-paced, tension-building. But I felt like I used a lot of good camera work in this to sort of get across the theme of the film altogether. And the way that I sort of used a lot of sort of basic, close-ups, medium shots, tracking shots. And I also, I used a lot of those kind of shots to get across what the film could be about, and sort of, show what the general theme of the film is. So I thought the camera work that I did, I thought it did meet the conventions of an action thriller genre film, as I used a lot of the typical camera shots that they use in those type of films, trailers as well.